raised the specter of using Beijing's pharmaceutical leverage to block critical components and supplies for dependent U.S. drug companies and send America into, quote, the hell of a novel coronavirus epidemic, unquote. While India and several European nations play critical roles in the global medical supply chain, China is among the top providers of active pharmaceutical ingredients, what they call them APIs, the basic components for antibiotics and other prescription drugs consumed by Americans. With the coronavirus crisis threatening to strain the U.S. government's largest stockpile of such drugs, health experts warn China's own outbreak and related societal shutdown could mean major shortages ahead as Chinese factories struggle to keep up production of the API. The Trump administration and lawmakers from both parties are now calling for a dramatic revamping of domestic U.S. drug manufacturing operations that have been outsourced to China and a handful of other nations over the past 20 years. The Pharma Letter, an online news site covering the pharmaceutical and biotech industries, offered some stark numbers on U.S. dependence on Chinese producers. China, quote, accounted for 95% of U.S. imports of ibuprofen, 91% of U.S. imports of hydrocortisone. That's a big deal. 70% of U.S. imports of, acetaminophen. 40% to 45% of U.S. imports penicillin. 40% of U.S. imports of heparin. I can read with one eye, really I can. According to Commerce Department data, in all, 80% of the U.S. supply of antibiotics are made in China. Now, ladies and gentlemen, China is an enemy. It is a communist regime. It is doing everything it can to harm our country without straight-out war. Those of you who are on drugs, and that's most of you, one form or another, some pharmaceuticals, should be very concerned about this. Even without a conscious boycott policy by the Beijing government, the disruption of Chinese domestic production caused by the pandemic is straining the global system. So there are moves afoot to discourage this and to strongly encourage investment in our country. And we'll talk to one of the leading thinkers and activists on this in Congress, Representative Ted Yoho of Florida, at the bottom of the hour. That's the plan. And I think, this is important, and we want to be in front of the curve on this stuff. But that's even more than that. Here's another piece in the Washington Times by Bill Gertz. China has called for using electromagnetic attacks on U.S. warships transiting the South China Sea, according to a state-run Chinese outlet. The Communist Party-affiliated organ Global Times, quoting a military expert, said the use of non-lethal electromagnetic and laser weapons should be used by the People's Liberation Army to expel American warships from the disputed sea. Now, this is the South China Sea, which really isn't disputed at all. The Chinese claim it's theirs with no basis whatsoever. And over $5 trillion in economic activity transits and navigates through that area every year. The report followed China's potentially dangerous use of a laser against a Navy P-88 Marine Patrol aircraft near Guam last month, and an earlier lasing 2 years ago of a C-130 aircraft near China's military base on the coast of Africa. The article was published Tuesday, the same day the Pacific Fleet announced on Twitter that the aircraft carrier strike group, led by the USS Theodore Roosevelt and the USS America, an amphibious assault carrier and leader of an expeditionary strike group, were conducting exercises in the South China Sea. The training exercise for both strike groups included fight maneuvers, air defense tests, and surface support missile exercises. The fleet said in a report on the exercise. At one point, Marines carried out a simulated visit, board search, and seizure exercise on the guided missile cruiser USS Bunker Hill, according to the report. The large-scale maneuvers are a direct challenge to China's claims to control 90% of the South China Sea, despite an international court ruling several years ago rejecting those claims. The Global Times reports that the carrier operations marked the third time in the past week the U.S. warships have trespassed into the sea, quote unquote. So China's gotten increasingly aggressive. They're aggressive in our hemisphere. They're aggressive throughout Southeast Asia. They're aggressive in Africa. Sadly, it looks like the Philippines, under a nutjob who runs that country, is leaving our orbit as an ally and moving into the Chinese orbit. The Chinese buy a lot of support with the money they put in these countries, and yet they wind up owning these countries hook, line, and sinker. We're going to discuss these sorts of things, as I say, with Ted Yoho at the bottom of the hour, who really is on top of this. It's very important. We need to disengage because China is the source of every major, not every, but every major virus in the last several decades that has affected our country. SARS virus, this virus, well, there are others, like the MERS virus and so forth, but many major viruses, let me put it that way, that have affected our country. Like this current virus. It's a disgrace.
I'm just listening to talk on radio. Driving, doing my job. At 7:15.
The China virus, the Wuhan virus, and wow, you must be a racist. It's a very good piece, but I've been talking about this a long time, by John Daniel Davidson at the Federalist. The media are embarrassing themselves over Trump's use of the Chinese virus. He said, what can be described as a moment of unconscious self-parody, the media pretended not to understand why Trump would refer to a virus in geographic terms, as if they never heard of the Spanish flu, the West Nile virus, Ebola, Zika, Lyme disease, or the many other diseases named for their places of origin, as if they haven't been doing the same thing for months. Because the mainstream media's ranks are
Cherry
populated by
vanilla
biased
Coke.
hacks who don't care half as much about reporting accurately on the Wuhan coronavirus as they care about making Trump seem like a racist. Why do you keep calling it the Chinese virus? Adds a seemingly indignant and bewildered Cecilia Vega of ABC News during Trump's press briefing yesterday. And she looked angry at the president, totally disrespectful, citing, quote, dozens of incidents of bias against Chinese Americans in this country, unquote. Isn't this racist? Trump's answer was straightforward and bone-crushingly obvious. He said, because it comes from China. It's not racist at all. It comes from China. That's why it comes from China. I want to be accurate. Trump has a point about accuracy. Indeed, Chinese is not a race, but a nationality, like American. And of course, in the phrase Chinese virus, the word Chinese is an adjective modifying the noun virus. But set all that aside, watching the exchange, you would have to wonder, is there no one in the White House press corps who's willing to pull Vega aside and implore her to not do this sort of thing on national TV? Is there no one who will politely tell her she's making a fool of herself and in the process making the entire press corps look ridiculous? Apparently not. If anything, Vega's penchant for performative outrage and concern trolling is shared by many of her colleagues. Later in the same briefing, a reporter asked the president about some unnamed White House official reportedly using the term Kung flu. Now, I don't mean to cause problems, Mr. Producer. I wouldn't use that phrase. Never would occur to me. But you remember the show? Kung Fu, the show? You're too young to remember. It was a show. It was actually a very respectable show. Kung Fu. So I don't know if anybody said this. I don't even know if there is such a person. They were asked by the president and then later Kellyanne Conway. Well, who said it? Well, you know we can't tell you that. Well, of course you can. But why is Kung Flu racist? I don't even understand what that's all about. It's a joke. Kung Fu was a TV show. Again, it wasn't a mockery. It wasn't provocative. Anyway, the fun was just beginning. After the briefing, reporters and pundits scurried back to their studios and newsrooms to compose serious monologues and straight-shooting explainers about the dangers of scapegoating and racism in times of crisis. Vox, as expected, churned out an article about how, quote, Trump's new fixation on using a racist name for the coronavirus is dangerous. Over at The Atlantic, which has been dutifully regurgitating Chinese Communist Party propaganda for weeks now. James Fallows tut-tutted over the phrase, while Grammy Wood, seeing an opportunity to sneer at Trump voters, declared Trump's use of Chinese virus, and that Trump was retreating like a child in his blanket, the kind of degenerate culture war squabble, which he feels most secure and his supporters most aggravated. NBC News chief foreign correspondent, the detestable Richard Engel, outdid them all, earnestly reminding his viewers that scapegoating was a real problem, quote, in the Middle Ages, unquote, and that Trump, you see, is scapegoating Chinese people by calling this the Chinese virus, quote, this is a bat virus, not a China virus, he said. It doesn't speak Chinese. It doesn't target Chinese people. God, are these people morons. So listening to these people, you really are far more riled
I
up
cannot
about
help
Trump
to laugh
saying
about
the word
that shit.
Chinese virus than they are about the Chinese Communist Party covering up the disease for months, allowing millions of people from virus-affected areas to travel overseas, silencing doctors who tried to get the word out, spreading lies about how the virus originated in the United States, and expelling the American press from the country this week. Those are all things the national press could be legitimately upset and outraged about. You might think they would be interested in reporting and commenting on such things. Instead, we're treated to asinine lectures about xenophobia that the blue check